We have the honour of having Dr. Sadhana Parashar here, and Dr. Parashar is going to address the issue of quality assurance in English language education. Is it more important in the private sector than the public sector, Sadhana?
Thank you, John, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm quite delighted to be here this evening and participate in this panel discussion, which has a lot of people who are known experts in the field of ELT, especially Keith Morrow, who's been my tutor and guide and director of a summer course that I did at Fitzwilliam in 1995, a long time back. And so it's a great pleasure sharing the same panel. I've, I think, spent around 30 seconds already. Now, my question, of course, is quality assurance more important in the private sector than in the public sector? And I tend to think that in India, where most of our organized sector is really limited and all our employability is in the unorganized sector, and our research says that it's almost 94 to 96%, I think that quality is important both in private and public. So I would say that quality assurance is, and especially in the field of English language education, so this distinction is more a matter of perception, and that perception probably has come in because of this large employability in the unorganized sector. The perception is, of course, there, and it's there to stay. When we look at the CBSE, which I'm sure you're aware is a national board with 15,000 schools across all the states of India, pan-India, and also in 24 countries. And if we go back to 2 decades, we had reform in English language education in the 90s. And 2 decades down, 2.5 decades down that, there was a move from learning English as a subject or language through literature approach, which was, there was a focus in the 90s where we had collaborated with the British Council again, and that's why I'm always delighted to come back and be a part of the British Council initiatives, where we looked at reform at secondary school education, which means at grade 9 and 10, and looked at how you can dissociate language learning, not just as a subject, but as language with all 4 skills, and also to move a little away from the textbook, though I tend to agree that there is still a lot of focus on the textbook. And so in this package, there was not only just one literature reader, but there were also skills books. But this experience of 2 to 3 decades has said that the focus on listening and speaking was still not there because it was not being assessed at the public exam. And I remember David Gradall in his book English Next quoted 2 researchers, one from DU, the CIE, and one from Pune, which said that the children who come out of grade 12, 11 and 12, as well as at secondary school level, they can write, but they can hardly speak. And if they speak, then it is not very communicative in the sense of it's not understood. And so after 2.5 decades, the CBSE is now partnered with Trinity, and we have piloted the assessment of speaking and listening at the public school level, at the public exam. And this will be our first year, which is again looking at standards which are mapped to the CFR. So the pilot was done with 25,000 students across schools. And course quality assurance in that case is also important. Just as an aside, I remember when I was researching for my MPhil, and I looked at question papers of an MA English course, and I compared them at 1885 MA question paper of the first year and 1987, which means 100 years. And there was a question which said that Lady Macbeth is the 4th witch elucidate. So the question remained the same over 100 years. So one can imagine that when reforms happen in education, they're really slow. They take a long time. With CBSE in the midst of major reforms now for the last 5 years, we are looking at accreditation as well, quality assurance in schools, because it's very difficult to look at schools and language education, English language education, without the context of quality assurance in schools. So we have in the school quality assessment and accreditation process, not 4 but 7 domains, and 4 of them are similar to what Keith said a little while back. There are 2 more, and one of them focuses on beneficiary satisfaction, which means to say that what does the student think of the school as being a quality institute or not? What does the teacher think of it? What does the non-teaching staff think of it? What does the parent body think of it? And lastly, what does the community think of it? And all these 7 domains are mapped to standards or benchmark statements, which have been driven from the policies and perspective of the government, which is MHRD, and of the CBSE. Of course, it's not really a top-down, because this entire statement and all the domains have been done with a group of teachers drawn from various kinds of schools, keeping in mind the heterogeneity, because CBSE caters to a very diverse group of schools, which is also the government schools. So there were management representatives from the government schools, because when it comes to a domain like, say, the management and administration, then in terms of infrastructure, there can be schools where the managements of private schools are answerable, but the management of government or public schools, the principals or the heads of schools can do nothing about it, because it doesn't fall in their domain. So those things were very much taken into account, and this is now mandatory for schools in the CBSE. Lastly, I'd just like to say that the in-service training, we have now a number of agencies who are empaneled with us. Some of them are in the field of expertise. They have the expertise in English language teaching. And we have a Center of Assessment, Evaluation, and Research. The former director is on the panel with us. That's Isabel. And the new director, the current director, Sarita, is in the audience. So I think after the panel discussion, there's opportunity to talk to them. Yes, thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Prasher. Can I just ask a question about that? You're talking about the new reforms under which now you have a quality assurance system with these 7 domains. So to what extent is this just a public sector phenomenon, and to what extent is it applicable to the private sector?
I mean, we are looking at both private and public schools when it comes to the domain of the CBSE. Yeah. So we have maybe 60% in the private sector, that is the public schools, and which we call public, but it is private independent schools. And then the government sector may be around 40%.
I see. Okay, so it's a good balance.